Hi, my name is Danny Womack. I'm the Executive Director of City Hope. And during this training video, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the safety planning piece of what we do. And you will discover that this is one of the most critical skills to have. And it requires a great deal of creativity and a great deal of forethought. With that said, as long as we're thinking the right thoughts, usually we can very successfully help a client feel comfortable in being able to leave the situation. So we need to think about safety planning at a couple of different key points in the process. We need to think about it before the person leaves. What types of things can be done to be most prepared when they're ready to leave? And there's a couple of things that you might not think about. One, we want to document as much as possible, because there's maybe the person has our client has bruises, maybe our client has visible injuries, and we want to document that. We want to keep a record of what has happened. Encourage our client to keep a record of the types of things that have happened, as well as pictures. And this won't be something that they necessarily keep at the house where it can be discovered, but perhaps a friend can keep it for them in the process of transitioning to a time that they're going to leave. This may help the client recognize over a course of time how often the abuse is happening and be less able to explain it away. It could also help when and if they do decide to leave the situation, to be able to secure domestic violence restraining order, as well as help the police or district attorney's office be able to prosecute the aggressor. So we'll want to keep pictures, any evidence of the abuse, journals of the types of things that have been happening, and we'll want to keep that in a safe place. To know where to go for help. Who can you contact? Who is there is there a friend? Is there a family member? Who will you let know when it's time to, when the client feels that it's time to leave the situation? We'll need to think about injuries. Is this something where they've been injured such that it's time to take them to a doctor or to the hospital to have their injuries tended to? In advance, let's think about the children. If there's children involved in this, what will this look like for them? What needs might they have? If they're young, do we need diapers to be ready to go? Is there a beloved blanket or stuffed animal that we'll need to have ready to go to make this as smooth as possible for the children? And is there some finances that can somehow be set aside without being noticed so that we're not putting our client in jeopardy? But are there finances so that she can have or he can have a little bit of a basis to be able to get started? So we need to help them think in advance, if they're not prepared to leave at the moment, exactly what types of things might be helpful and at what time they would be willing to leave. What is the non-negotiable that could happen such that they decide that it's time to leave that relationship? If they feel like they're getting close, let's put important documents aside to be able to do that. Things like identification, a driver's license, birth certificates, the birth certificates of the children, social security cards, financial information, passcodes, money and or credit cards, information with account numbers about checking and savings accounts. Maybe they've already gotten a protective order, and so copies of that protective order, or if they're going through a divorce, any court paperwork that they may have that may prove helpful. Even think down to if they're going to take the car with them, car registration, proof of insurance, medical records, school reports. If they have immigration paperwork, let's make sure that we encourage them to have copies or originals of that ready to go. Things like their passport if they're going to need to travel. Marriage license would be helpful as well. A list of emergency phone numbers, the local police or sheriff's department, any domestic violence programs that are around that they could be able to quickly call, friends, relatives, family members, doctors, doctor's phone numbers, dentists, district attorney's office, those types of things. And I want to encourage that this needs to not just be on the phone. This really needs to be a separate piece of paper with all these numbers written down, because I can't tell you how many times we have come on scene as City Hope to help a client leave a violent situation to discover that the aggressor took the phone or broke the phone, or that the phone is being tracked and it's not safe for the phone to be turned on or used, and now we're out that information. And perhaps they thought that they were planning well by having all this information in the phone, but we've had to go through a lot sometimes to try to find a friend that we can contact on behalf of the client, because no phone numbers have been memorized or written down elsewhere. So in this kit that can be left at a different location, somewhere safe where it's not going to be found, make sure there's written down these types of phone numbers. Other things to think about, medication, an extra set of house keys or car keys. We've had a client that was ready to leave and had decided that as soon as the husband went to work, she was going to leave. She had a kit, she had some things ready to go, but she didn't have an extra set of car keys. And he took the car keys with him to make sure that she wouldn't be able to leave the house. So if there's a way to get a set of car keys, a copy of the key to the car made, that type of thing, that could be helpful. If there's things that's just of sentimental value in the house that you'd want to take, or that your client would want to take, perhaps a cell phone that hasn't been used, that can't be tracked, that's a pay-as-you-go type phone, so that it can be utilized in the aftermath of fleeing the situation. Changes of clothes for you and your children, for the client's child. As we talk about safety planning, all of those things can be done in advance of the decision to leave if there's time. Obviously, getting out with the life of the client is the most important thing, and we should always encourage our client to recognize that their personal safety is the #1 priority, and all of these other things are helpful, but not necessary. And so if she needs to leave at a moment's notice, or he needs to leave at a moment's notice to be safe, that's what needs to happen. If there is time to prepare, these types of things are helpful. Things to consider: recognize that for your client, at the moment your client leaves, that becomes one of the most dangerous times in a domestic violence relationship. And so there needs to be great care taken in how they leave and in the aftermath. And this can go down a couple of ways. Perhaps there was an incident and law enforcement was called, and law enforcement has arrested the aggressor. Perhaps they can't find the aggressor. He's out there somewhere, or perhaps she's decided that she is just going to leave, even though there hasn't necessarily been an incident that has required law enforcement. If the client is staying in the house, we need to think about what that looks like for that house to be safe. Things like changing locks, changing phone numbers, having caller ID requested on the phones, getting new phone numbers, that type of thing. Does the aggressor know where the client works? Do we need to adjust times going to work or coming home from work? We had a City Hope situation come up where literally we heard from the school that it was a problem with the child arriving at school at the same time as the other students, because the aggressor in that particular domestic violence situation had friends that were literally tailing the woman everywhere she went, including the school, and the school was willing to work with adjusting the drop-off hours and the pickup hours. So community is often willing to come along and help. We just need to be thinking these thoughts as potential options to be able to protect our client and help our client protect themselves. The client, if schools are involved, will need to alert the schools as to what's going on, and if the other party is a parent or has been on the emergency release forms, is that still okay, or does that need to be adjusted to ensure that he doesn't end up with the children if he or she isn't supposed to have the children? We need to talk about restraining orders, and we'll have a whole nother video all about restraining orders, but discussing with the client if this is something that's necessary or would help them feel safe, that there's community organizations that will help them go through the process of getting a restraining order. These are the types of thoughts that we need to think for them and help them think. If we get a restraining order, who or where are we asking to be protected? Is this just something where there can't be violent interaction, or are we going to be asking for a stay-away order where the aggressor can't come within a certain number of feet of our client, the victim, or the children, perhaps the victim's parents' house, the schools, the work, these types of things. All things that we can be talking about and that we should be thinking of when it comes to helping our clients at the time that they're going to leave. Another thing that we might want to look at is renting a P.O. box. If they're going to be staying in the area, perhaps mail shouldn't be coming to their house. And if they're going to start separating, looking at a P.O. box or using a different address. If there's appointments, regular appointments that are scheduled, does our client regularly go to a gym that the aggressor knows about and could meet up there? Does the client regularly go to get her hair done or nails done, or for doctor's appointments or counseling? Any of those types of ongoing appointments, we may want to adjust, mix up the schedule a little bit so that it makes it a little harder for her to be found by him. Stores, frequenting different stores. If they had their favorite park to go and let the kids play at, perhaps we need to be able to recommend different parks. Who picks up and drives the kiddos to school? Who's involved with them? Who's in this circle that needs to know that there's been a shift that has happened and that perhaps somebody that was safe before is no longer safe? Those are the types of things that we want to look at in the aftermath of leaving to make sure that our client stays as safe as possible in the midst of it. And we'll have other training videos that talk specifically about some of the options that are available to her or him as far as next places and what some of those options are. But for now, we want to make sure that you're thinking the thoughts that we need to think as far as safety planning. With City Hope, we have a resource that will be able to help you walk through all of this to make sure that we're not forgetting some of the details. But it's important to begin to think about that. And you'll notice on particular calls that you'll have to think thoughts that maybe you didn't have to think on other calls, that there'll be particular nuances to some of our calls that make it especially difficult or dangerous perhaps. These types of thoughts will help you be able to navigate, and then you'll be able to think of different ones in those situations that in the future we can be aware of as well. So in conclusion, there's a video that you're going to be watching here in just a minute that navigates and that tells a story of a domestic violence situation. In this particular one, there's a husband and a wife. The husband's been drinking, and the wife calls 911. And when the law enforcement arrives, you'll see on the video the interaction. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to watch this video with the mindset that you're responsible for safety planning for this client. What would you do? What would your safety plan look like if this particular client decided to stay in this current situation? And what would your safety plan look like? What would you brainstorm with her if your client decided that this was the time that she was going to leave this situation? And I want you to document and write down both safety plans.
Well, this is Dr. Stan DeKoven. I hope you've enjoyed our course and the courses on domestic violence. Just want to share some thoughts here. We want to especially thank Danny Womack for the incredible expertise that she's shown in her teaching on domestic violence intervention. She's given you an assignment in her video. So we want you to complete that assignment and hold it until the end of the course. Once you've completed the worksheets in Unit 3 and Unit 4, you want to email them to yours truly. That's sdekoven, my last name, DEKOVEN, @vision.edu. Or you can snail mail it to me at Dr. Stan DeKoven, P.O. Box 1680, Ramona, California 92065. Attention, DV certification, and I'll make sure your material gets graded and of course get your feedback and all of that. So again, we want to thank Danny and the team at City Hope Ministries, and also all of you students. We're trusting that this has been a valuable experience for you.